Hello, hello, and welcome to another live. If you're a returning viewer, listener, subscriber, welcome back, welcome back. If you're new to the space, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and the subscription button as we continue to grow stronger together. Voices in Education is a safe space where we share and learn from each other. We do that in a respectful way to ensure that we're maintaining our safe community. All right. So we do not bash anyone. We do not belittle anyone. We do not disrespect anyone. We understand too that we share different views or different perspectives. And that's totally okay once we're doing that in a respectful way, because we also know that there is richness in diversity and there is so much that we can learn from each other. So, again, welcome, welcome, welcome. So, for this conversation or this session, I am going to share with you the main findings, conclusions, and recommendations from the Integrity Commission's report as it relates to the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Dr. Honorable Andrew Holness. All right. So I am just going to share with you so you'll be able to follow on screen in the context of the report. All right. So I'm just going to share with you those aspects of the report. Mark, it's over perhaps, I believe, 170 plus pages or around there, about 173 pages. So it's very long, but the important aspects really the summary of the investigation, the conclusion, and the recommendation. So I'm going to share those sections with you again. I was hoping that there would have been kind of like an executive summary. It's not, I don't think I see one, but it's okay. So I'm just going to transition here, all right, to the report so that you can see and you can follow along. If it is that you're on your device, right, you can turn it horizontally, so turn it sideways, and in that way, you'll be better able to see, all right, what is on screen. So again, welcome one, welcome all. Please remember to hit the like button, hit the subscription button too, and share. Tell a friend, tell a family member to come on over because we're going to share with you what is in this report and you'll be able to follow along on screen as well. All right, so as you can see here, it's the Integrity Commission's report. And let me just scroll here so that you can see exactly what this report is about. So, investigation report into the statutory declarations submitted by the Most Honorable Mr. Andrew Holness, Prime Minister, for the years 2019 to 2022 in respect of concerns that he owns assets disproportionate to his lawful earnings and that he made false statements in his statutory declarations by way of omissions contrary to the law. So this is what they're basically telling you, that this is what the report is about. And I just want to also share with you that this report was submitted to Parliament All right. And I believe it was sent on September 5. All right. The 5th of September, 2024. And it was sent to the Most Honorable Juliet Holness, so the Speaker of the House of Representatives. It was also sent to Honorable Eroy Clark, all right, Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. It was also sent to the Senator, the Honorable Tom Tavares Finson, and he's the President of the Senate. And it was also sent to Miss Colleen Lowe, Clerk of the House of Parliament. All right, so the report was sent to these persons. All right, and it was tabled in Parliament too. But let's just get to the summary of the investigation. So that should give us some context. So let me just try and get that for you guys. So we have here the table of contents. So just to give you an overview, so chapter 1 is the summary of investigations and findings. Chapter 2, the background. Chapter 3, the investigation. Chapter 4, terms of reference. And then they have chapter 5, the law, evidence, and discussion of findings. 5.1, the obligation to file statutory declarations. 5.9, discussion of findings. Chapter 6, conclusions and recommendations. 6.1, conclusions. 6.2, recommendations. And then they have the appendices. All right, so there you go. So we are going to start with chapter 1 for this one. All right, and we're going to see what is in chapter 1. So let me just try and bring that up for you. And again, welcome one, welcome all. If you're just tuning in, welcome. I'm just going to check to see how this view looks horizontally on my device here, just to see if you're able to get a good view of what is happening. And it looks pretty good here to me. All right, so again, guys, this is chapter 1, summary of investigation. And I suspect that I'm going to need a lot to drink because there's a lot here to read. All right, so just give me a second here. All right, so this is what chapter 1 is saying here. And perhaps I could use a little pointer here. Let's see if that works too. A little spotlight. So here is what chapter 1, the first aspect here of chapter 1 is that this investigation report by the Director of Investigation, so DI, all right, of the Prime Minister, so Mr. Holness, into the 2021 statutory declaration is based on a referral by the commissioners of the Integrity Commission, all right, pursuant to Section 14, subsection 5 of the Corruption Prevention Act and Section 43, subsection 2, subsection A of the Integrity Commission Act. More particularly, there were concerns. So this is where we are at right now. So perhaps just I light this area. So more particularly, there were concerns that Mr. Holness owned assets disproportionate to his lawful earnings and for the declaration period, and that he made false statements in his statutory declaration for the stated period. All right, so the referral from the commissioners, all right, among other things here, indicates the following. And they have this here, this area highlighted. So The declarant's net worth was calculated based on information that was included on statutory declaration for the year ended 2021 and additional information provided by the declarant. All right. And they're saying in terms of the net worth grew. All right. And this was over a 5-year period, and unexplained changes in net worth, sorry. All right. That was calculated there as well. And let's go down a little bit here. Although the declarant's net worth appeared to align with income for some years, the growth of the net assets of companies for which the declarants and close family members are majority shareholders and the actual contributions of the minority shareholders need to be further examined. All right, so that's a point there. So again, I'm just checking in the chat there. All right, so that's the very first part there of chapter 1. All right, so 1.2, it is on the foregoing basis that the Director of Investigation commenced an investigation into the instant matter. For clarity, this investigation was conducted on the basis of a referral in respect of Mr. Holness's statutory declaration for the year 2021. So what I am understanding from this is that there was some referral made to them regarding Mr. Holness's declaration. So I guess somebody, and I believe if you look on their website, you can submit. So I guess there was some submission done in this regard. All right. So in order, however, to thoroughly investigate the issues raised, the Director of Investigations inquiries had to be expanded to 2018 and up to 2023. As will be seen below, the DI was unable to arrive at a conclusion regarding illicit enrichment in respect of Mr. Holness, as he did not have access to a schedule of Mr. Holness's personal expenses over the relevant period, and due to unresolved questions concerning the operations of companies with which Mr. Holness is connected, sorry. So this is what the director is saying here. All right, so what the director is saying is that they or he or she was unable to arrive at a conclusion regarding illicit enrichment in respect of Mr. Holness, as he did not have access to a schedule of Mr. Holness's personal expenses over the relevant period, and due to unresolved questions concerning the operations of companies with which Mr. Holness is connected. So in essence, I am getting here is that I cannot really conclude that, Mr. Holness is guilty of illicit enrichment, because what the investigator is saying that there wasn't enough information. So what he was saying there, I'm getting is that they would have wanted to see, the schedule of Mr. Holness's personal expenses, as well as, I guess, having him answering some questions. And I guess for them, they weren't privy to that information. That information was not available. So they could not come to that conclusion of illicit enrichment. All right. But what the Director of Investigation here from the report is saying that nonetheless, they conducted a net worth analysis in respect of Mr. Holness and a company wholly owned by him. The reference analysis did not reveal any unexplained growth in Mr. Holness's net worth for the year 2021. The analysis, however, revealed unexplained growth in Mr. Holness's net worth for 2022. So here is the, I guess, the problematic year in the sense that the investigator is saying they did the net worth analysis, and for 2021, Mr. Holness, it was okay. There wasn't any unexplained growth, right? So in terms of his net worth for 2021. But when they did that same analysis for 2022, the report is saying that it revealed unexplained growth, all right, there for 2022. All right, so 2021, they're saying that was good, but in 2022, there was some unexplained growth just from the report here. And you can follow on screen, guys. I'm just reading from the Integrity Commission's report. So welcome one, welcome all. If you're just tuning in, we're looking at the summary of the findings of the Director of Investigations report. All right. And this report was submitted or shared by the Integrity Commission. All right. So here they're saying the process of examining Mr. Holness's 2021 statutory declaration for the purpose of certification and publication commenced in 2022. On September 30th, 2022, the commissioners, as part of this process, had cause to refer the matter to the Director of Investigation for investigation. Out of the concern that said declaration was incomplete due to omissions, the DI found, so this is the Director of Investigation now, found that there were indeed omissions of bank accounts from Mr. Holness's statutory declaration, which rendered the reference declaration incomplete and inaccurate. All right, so what I am gathering here, all right, so as a part of the process, right, and I suppose because of that unexplained growth for 2022, all right, so there was this, I guess, cause referral to the DI for investigation out of concerns, and then they're saying that the said declaration was incomplete due to omissions. And they're saying now that the Director of Investigation also found that there were indeed omissions of bank accounts from Mr. Holness's statutory declaration, which rendered the reference declaration incomplete and inaccurate. Welcome, Max Morgan. Thank you for liking. All right, thanks, guys. So let's go to the next point here. A major issue which arose was that the currency in which one of the omitted accounts was held was reported in US dollars by the relevant financial institution instead of what ought to have been in, let's go down here, in Jamaican dollars. The former altered the course of the investigation. So here they're saying that, there was an issue, a major issue, because one of the financial institutions apparently stated that one of the accounts, right, was in US currency, US dollar. But then it was really in Jamaican dollars. So that was a bit of a process in terms of the investigation. So that kind of, as they said, altered, so I guess hindered, somewhat perhaps pause, or took some more time in terms of figuring that out, because that would have been significant, I guess, in terms of his net worth. All right, so that was a part of it. So they're saying again that, the financial institution, right, I guess reported that this particular account was in US dollars when it was actually in Jamaican dollars. All right. So that caused the investigation to be altered in some way. And I guess the process, I guess, in terms of the time would have been definitely a bit more to move on to, I guess, another stage. All right, so here at an advanced stage of the Director of Investigations investigation, the relevant financial institution indicated that it had made an error and that the reference bank account was held in Jamaican dollars and not in US dollars, as it had initially indicated. And so here is where, I guess, time. All right. So what they're saying based on this report is that they were already, at a very advanced stage of the investigation. And now this financial institution is now saying they made an error because this account, I guess, by the Prime Minister is not in US dollars, is actually in Jamaican dollars. So you can see where, this would have definitely been a big significant or make a big difference in terms of the integrities commissions or the director of investigations, investigation at this point. So here they're saying, let's go. On this basis, the investigation was closed on February 19, 2023, and an investigation report submitted to the commissioners consistent with Section 54 of the Integrity Commission Act. The omissions were found to be inadvertent, and therefore no finding of culpability was made on the part of Mr. Holness. The statutory declaration was nonetheless inaccurate and incomplete. Welcome, guys. Let me just check the chat here in a little. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please remember to hit the like button, hit the share button. All right, and we're happy to have you, just sharing in the chat. Let me know where you're tuned in from. That would be fantastic as well. All right, welcome one, welcome all. Happy to have you here. All right, so back to this point here where they're saying the director is saying that on the basis the investigation was closed on February 19, and I suspect regarding this particular, I guess, bank account here. And what they're saying is that the omissions were found to be inadvertent. So pretty much unintentional, all right? It was unintended. And therefore, they're saying no finding of guilt was made on the part of the Prime Minister. But the statutory declaration was still inaccurate and incomplete. All right. So even though the bank came in to say, hey, we made a mistake here, they're still saying there were still issues with accuracy in terms of even completeness. All right. So let's just go to the next point here. So they're saying Mr. Holness was requested to, all right, and thereafter submitted to the Commission an updated statutory declaration for 2021. The reference updated statutory declaration was examined by the Director of Information and Complaints pursuant to Section 42 of the Integrity Commission Act. This examination raised further concerns to include that Mr. Holness owned assets disproportionate to his lawful earnings, the results of which is that the 2021 statutory declaration was referred by the Commission for investigation a second time on May 3rd, 2023. All right, so note the initial referral of the 2021 statutory declaration on September 30th, 2022 did not benefit from a full examination by the Director of Information and Complaints because the issue then was the omissions found to have been made, which would inhibit a full examination of the said declaration, unlike the second referral of May 3rd, 2023, which came after a resubmission of the statutory declaration by Mr. Holness and an examination of Mr. Holness's assets, liabilities, and income for accuracy and completeness. All right, so that's that point there. And 1.6. So, based on the second referral, right, the DI's investigation led him to examine over 3,600 transactions. So, here, this is where we are. In respect of approximately 28 bank accounts, which either were or are presently associated with Mr. Holmes. So 3,600 transactions, that's a lot. 28 bank accounts, still a lot. And just to be clear, they say which, all right, either were or are presently associated with Mr. Holness. So I suspect some bank accounts that perhaps may have listed him as a beneficiary or emergency contact, so not necessarily owned by him, but where is listed or associated with. So 28. All right. They also state here that several witnesses were interviewed while witness statements were requested from several others, resulting in the recording or submission of over 80 witness statements. Judicial hearings were also convened with some witnesses. Requests for explanation pursuant to Section 14, subsection 5 of the Corruption Prevention Act were also made of Mr. Holness. All right, so they're telling you these are some of the things that we did while this was taking. So 3,600 transactions. 28 from 28 bank accounts associated with Mr. Holness or connected with him, over 80 witness statements, judicial hearings, and they requested explanations from the Prime Minister as well. All right, so let's just move on here. Further, and having regard to the complexity and the volume of the transactions involved with respect to Mr. Holness statutory declarations, an independent international forensic accounting examiner was engaged by the Commission to determine, among other things, the nature and extent of the interplay between Mr. Holness and three connected companies, namely Imperium Investment Holdings Limited, Estate Bridge Development Company Limited, and Positive Media Solution Limited. Based on the volume of the transactions observed in the bank accounts owned or associated with Mr. Holness and the referenced three companies, the forensic examiner took approximately 6 months to complete his examination and submit his report. Now, guys, this is a report that I would want to see, and this is a report that I feel that we perhaps should know about, because this was, I guess, a significant part of the process, because they're saying based on the complexity and the volume regarding the transactions, and now we hear about these three companies that are connected to Mr. Holness, so Imperium, Estate Bridge, and Positive Media Solution, right? They needed somebody externally, so they hired an independent international forensic accounting examiner, and it took that examiner, they say, approximately 6 months to complete his examination and submit his report. So I would love to, find out what was in this particular report in terms of the findings, because I feel like this would be very significant to this whole process, this whole report, What did that report state, right? So that report from the independent international forensic examiner, what was in that report that this particular individual submitted to the director of investigation? All right, so we move on to this point. So during the course of the investigation, it was established that Mr. Holness was required to file statutory declarations with the commission at the material time, which he did, it was also found that Mr. Holness, one, failed to include the statutory declarations, certain bank accounts he jointly held, rendering said declarations inaccurate and incomplete. And the next point here, oops, just a little bit too far here. Let's see. So acquired an asset in 2019 for which the source of funding has not been satisfactorily explained. Next point, when his assets, liabilities, and income are taken together for the year 2022, the analysis revealed what appears to be unexplained growth in his net worth. And just look at the language, they say what appears to be. So and this is something that they do in law, especially when they're not going to say that you are, guilty. They soften the language. So they're not saying that in terms of making defamatory statements. So they'll use this language, what appears to be unexplained growth. It could be that, but they use this type of language. So the next point here, held assets in Imperium Investments Holdings Limited, hereafter referred to as Imperium, shortened version works, which made investments into two associated companies. The operation of these companies rise to tax compliance and other concerns around the source of funding for the operations of same. And so by now too, you perhaps would know that they have reached out to the FIB, all right, and the FIB, they have confirmed that they have received the report from, I guess, the Integrity Commission or the Director of Investigation in terms of looking into further issues that they, I guess, suspect that there might be something there for them to look at. All right. And I cannot confirm whether or not the tax administration of Jamaica, because I believe they made a statement to the effect that they can't share if they're investigating or doing whatever in terms of that. So I guess we'll hear a little bit more, all right, later on. All right, so welcome one, welcome all. Jerry, welcome. All right, so the next part here, compliance issues were also found in respect of the practices of one financial institution regarding a loan facility it provided to Mr. Holness. And I think we heard about that financial institution. And if it is the same one that I am hearing about, they were saying that based on the money that was provided, it was an unsecured, loan as opposed to a secure loan. And the company, I guess, was saying something along the line as if, they'll tend to do that with their prime, I guess, clients. So that was, I guess, an issue for the investigator here. So consequent and on the foregoing, the Director of Investigation recommends that this report be referred to the Director of Corruption Prosecution and other competent authorities for consideration, which is what had happened. All right. So this was shared with the FID for sure. And I suspect the tax administration, TAJ, Tax Administration of Jamaica, but they are not able to state. So as shared with you guys, we're going to move. So that was the summary of the findings, chapter 1. So we're going to move to the conclusions and the recommendations. And as I shared, so far, one significant piece that I would have loved to see is that report from the International Forensic Examiner. So they made reference, and that took that particular person 6 months and the individual submitted a report. So would love to hear what is contained in that report, because I feel that that would be very significant in the context of their report here. And again, welcome one, welcome all. If you're just tuning in, we're just reviewing, all right, the report here from the Integrity Commission, all right, regarding the Prime Minister of Jamaica. So we're not making up anything. We're just telling you as is. All right. So welcome one, welcome all. And as you can see, lots of pages, but I am just getting to the points that are definitely relevant. I am really wondering why there isn't an executive summary in this report, but it is what it is, right? So we are now at chapter 6, conclusions and recommendations. So we're going to look at some of the conclusions here and also the recommendations. So welcome again, guys. Happy to have you here. Please remember to hit the like button and the subscription button. Can I get some persons to just close the live chat X and just hit the thumbs up button? Let's do better with the likes. We can definitely do better with the likes, and comment in the chat. Let me know where you are tuned in from. And also, what are your views on this context? All right. Think I'm ready again. Had to drink some water here. All right, so we're going to start by looking at the conclusions from this investigation. So the first part here, the DI concludes that Mr. Holness was required to file statutory declarations with the Commission for the periods in question, which he did. The DI further concludes that Mr. Holness, having filed the reference statutory declarations, failed to include in them at least 4 bank accounts jointly held by him at the material time, contrary to the Integrity Commission Act and the Parliament Integrity Members Act. All right. So what they're saying here from the first conclusion based on the DI is that he was required to file his statutory declarations. He did, but having done so, there were at least 4. And at this point, I feel that they could be specific to tell us at least, is it 4 or, more than 4, but they say at least 4, all right, bank accounts that he failed to include, all right? So just to share that. The next part here is that the DI concludes that on the basis of the analysis conducted on Mr. Holness's Imperium's assets, liabilities, and income for the year 2021, there does not appear to be any unexplained growth in net worth. All right, so they're saying 2021, based on what they have seen with Imperium, there is no unexplained growth in net worth. All right. Then here now, in 2022, however, the DI found what appeared to be unexplained growth in Mr. Holness Imperium's net worth. All right. So, and here they cite the figure here, just over 1.9. All right, mil here. So what they're saying is that 2021, that was good with Imperium. Now in 2022, there seemed to be some unexplained growth with the same company. All right. The DI's conclusion is premised on the fact that based on the evidence available to him, inclusive of explanations provided, the increase observed in Mr. Holness's asset or net worth cannot, without more, be justified by his known income and liabilities. So what they're saying is that this gain, this net worth here, this figure here, they're saying based on what they're doing, all right, it doesn't appear that it can be justified by, based on what they have seen in terms of income and liabilities. All right. So the DI was, however, hindered in his attempt to fully resolving this issue on the basis of Mr. Holness's refusal to provide him with a breakdown of his expenses for the period covered by the investigation. So they're saying that they did not have, certain expenses for this particular period. So it could be a case where, they're not able to, I guess, definitively say then that he has, I guess, there is some form of illicit enrichment because they weren't privy to certain information. For example, breakdown of his expenses. And they're saying here this refusal on the part of Mr. Holness inhibited the DI's ability to make a more comprehensive and final assessment of Mr. Holness's assets, liabilities, and income. In other words, the DI was not in a position to determine let's go, what portion of Mr. Holness's income was used for living and other expenses, and therefore not available for asset acquisition. So the DI is saying, they weren't privy to certain information, right? So as a result, they're not too sure, but based on what they have or what they have seen or based on what they have used in terms of their analysis, right? It it looks as if there was some unexplained, growth. All right, there. So let's just move on here. Further, the question surrounding the use of funds belonging to Positive Jamaica Foundation to purchase a bond worth US 94,000 and the operations of companies with which Mr. Holness is or was associated and which he named as a source of funds to acquire particular assets would also need to be resolved by the relevant entities before the DI can make a final conclusion on the question of illicit enrichment. Significant financial transactions were seen among three of the reference companies, namely Imperium, Positive Media, and Estate Bridge. More particularly, the evidence indicate deposits and withdrawals, all right? And we see the big figures here and here, all right, between 2020 and 2020 and June 2023. All right, so they're saying there are some other issues that they are seeing but they are not able to make a final conclusion here on the question of illicit enrichment. So they believe that there needs to be some things, in terms of resolving what is happening. And they make reference here to relevant entities. All right. So I guess that's where the FID comes in, and they were making reference, I guess, to Tax Administration of Jamaica. And they're saying, okay, these things, I guess, need to be done before the DI, the Director of Investigation here, can make a final conclusion on the question of illicit enrichment. All right. So having regard to an asset, all right, acquired by Mr. Holness on September 2nd, 2019 at a cost, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, 94,000 US here. The DI concludes that only just over US 61,000 here was funded by him. The remaining amount, about just over 32,000 US, was taken from funds apparently belonging to a registered charity, Positive Jamaica Foundation, of which Mr. Holness was at the material time a director. All right, so this is something that they're highlighting here, and that's a key word because if it is that and it could be that they're certain or they're not certain, as I say in law, once you're not going out there to fully accuse someone because you don't have all the facts to make a final conclusion or a statement, a definitive one, they will use these terms to ensure that they're covering themselves and try not to bring anybody's character, I guess, into, I guess, disrepute in that sense. So again, where they're saying, there are some things that, need some further investigation. All right. So, and I suspect that is why we have the again. The DI further concludes that Mr. Holness' indication on July 16, 2024, that the full portion of the bond was erroneously attributed to him by NCBCM is misleading and unsupported by the evidence. The DI's conclusion is based on, I guess, is based on the following. Mr. Holness had, throughout the life of the bond, reported same to the Commission in his statutory declarations as, let's go, his asset. It was never indicated that it did not fully belong to him. Next, Mr. Holness, prior to the purchase of the bond, entered into a written bond purchase agreement, which clearly states the value of the bond to be US 94,000. Next, the duly authorized officer at the NCBCM indicated that in purchasing the bond, they acted on Mr. Holness's written instructions provided by way of a schedule to the contract. All right, and that no concerns were raised by Mr. Holness in relation to any contrary intention. Concerns were only raised by Mr. Holness in June 2024 when NCBCM made contact with him to ascertain the source of funds for the purchase. All right, next point here. Regular statements were provided to Mr. Holness, which clearly stated the value of the bond and any interest. All right. Next, in 2020, the proceeds from another bond, all right, belonging to Positive Jamaica Foundation were erroneously deposited in Mr. Holness's personal account. This error was reported to NCBCM by Mr. Holness, and the necessary adjustments were made. All right, there was no indication at that time that there was an error in respect of the bond purchase in Mr. Holness's name. And next year, the bond in question was called in 2020, and the principal and interest were paid to Mr. Holness. The proceeds were incorporated into Mr. Holness's assets, which he holds in Imperium, and subsequently reinvested. This asset, in its totality, was treated as belonging to Mr. Holness in every material respect up to June 2024, when the DI's investigations led to inquiries being made of Mr. Holness as to the source of funds used to purchase the asset in issue. Mr. Holness's explanation in this regard must therefore, for the foregoing reasons, be rejected and be deemed to be unsatisfactory. So what they're saying here is that based on the investigation from the DI, it appears that this bonding question, this 94,000 US, right? It was purchased using, I guess, money from a charity where he's the director. And then I guess there was some back and forth where Mr. Olno, this was just an error at this point, and the money, the principal, the interest of that particular bond was paid back to Mr. Holness, I guess, via Imperium. I guess that was the company that was listed there. And so what the DI is saying, based on what has happened here in terms of it, like Mr. Holness's explanation, cannot stand. It should be rejected and deemed unsatisfactory. All right, so the next part here is that the DI concludes that the funding of the company, Positive Media, in which Imperium, all right, so Imperium owned by Mr. Holness here, was a majority shareholder before being replaced by one of Mr. Holness's sons in 2022, raises several concerns as to the true nature of this company's operations. The DI's conclusion is premised on Mr. Holness's explanation as to the funding of the reference company, wherein he indicated that Positive Media is funded by Imperium. The evidence obtained by the DI suggests that Positive Media was funding Imperium rather than Imperium funding Positive Media. All right. So this is what they're saying. So Mr. Holness was based on this report. They're saying that, there are some concerns raised because Mr. Holness here, Positive Media is funding Imperium. But the evidence, was showing that Positive Media was funding Imperium rather than Imperium funding Positive Media. All right. So here, I guess initially they were saying Imperium was funding Positive Media, but the DI is saying it's the evidence is suggesting that Positive Media was funding Imperium, and they talk about the transfers from Positive Media here to Imperium. All right. And again, they're saying this will need to be ventilated by the relevant competent authority. And then here, the DI concludes that the filing of nil income tax returns for the years 2021 and 2022 on the part of Imperium, Estate Bridge, and Positive Media. So the three companies that are associated are connected with Mr. Holness. All right. So in Alright, so the DI consider income of this company. All right, guys, hopefully you're hearing me back. I believe the audio is back now. All right, so just let me know if you're hearing me in the chat there. I'm just doing a quick check-in in the chat. Just let me know if you're hearing me in the chat. Just checking in the chat here. Okay, I believe it's good. All right. So here, in terms of the filing of nil income tax returns, that is another area here for the investigation. And so what they're saying, I guess here, is that there needs to be some, I guess, investigation here, I guess from TAJ. All right, so that is another significant part. But let me just read this last part here. So I was reading where, the DI further concludes that the filing of a nil income tax returns and income tax return with income of 355,100 by Green Emerald in 2021 and 2022, respectively, in circumstances where this company had over the reference period provided short-term loans to Positive Media of over 20 million, and more importantly, appear to be in operation, also raises serious tax compliance concerns. It is accepted and understood that a company, though operating at a loss, may well be in a position to offer loans. The live issue here, however, is whether the named companies had any income and expenses over the relevant period which were not disclosed in their returns to TAJ. So here, what I am getting to is sometimes the reports or the conclusions that we're looking at, they're so mixed in terms of, and I find this one too, because what they're saying is that, okay, you report like, I guess, nil tax returns, and but then this section of the conclusion is also saying that, you know what, the company could be still operating at the loss and can still offer loans. But they're saying, you know what, we're not leaving any stone unturned. Some checks should happen here, because the question is whether or not, the company had any income over that period. So somebody to check to see if this company had any income. It is, but they're still saying okay, because they don't know what is happening here. And I guess you kind of get the sense where, oh, we might have some trust issues here, so let's go and check. But they're saying it is possible that, you can have a company in this sense giving loans and still operating at a loss. So the director of investigation is making, I guess, that little part there clear. All right, the DI further concludes that the foregoing conduct on the part of principals of Imperium Estate Bridge, Positive Media, and Green Emerald constitute a fundamental undermining of the tax laws, and more particularly a breach of Section 99, subsection 1 of the Income Tax Act. This breach deprived the government of the opportunity to make an assessment as to whether any taxes were due for the years 2021 and 2022 in respect of the named companies, and if so, the amount due and payable. All right, so they're saying these companies, they're undermining the tax laws here. That seems to be a statement, clear statement from them. And then it goes on. The DI concludes that the appointment of Mr. Norman Brown, a business associate of Mr. Holness, as chairman of the UDC and the HAJ, so the Urban Development Corporation and the Housing Agency of Jamaica, poses significant conflict of interest concerns. These concerns emanate from the fact that both entities fall under Mr. Holness's portfolio as Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation. As established above, Mr. Brown, who is a minority shareholder in Estate Bridge, has made the single largest shareholder contribution to this company since its incorporation. Notwithstanding the foregoing, there is no direct evidence to suggest that there were any improprieties on the part of Messrs. Holness and Brown. So pretty much on the part of Mr.'s, Holness and Brown. All right, so what they're saying is that they're, they have concerns regarding the possibility of a conflict of interest, because Mr. Brown is also an associate of Mr. He's also the chairman of these, I guess they companies name. And so there is a possible overlapping of roles in that. All right. And I guess it's similar to one of the other one, but sometimes people take conflict of interest to be that you're saying that they're not trustworthy, they're not this or they're not good. But then You see, this report similar to the one that I said previously. It gives you that mixed feeling where it's like you're saying there's a conflict of interest, but now down here you're saying there is no direct evidence to suggest that there were any, improprieties, in that regard. So it's better to make it a recommendation to say based on whatever you'd recommend. But when you're concluding, like I get that mix sometimes in that sense in terms of the report, but sometimes when we say just recuse yourself because of the likelihood of a conflict of interest, we're not attacking your character to say that you're not trustworthy enough, but we have to understand that in some situations, we go in there with our subjectivities, we go in there with our own views and perspectives that just not going to change. And sometimes we are afraid to look into ourselves and say, you know what? I'm going to be biased here, so let me just move on. All right. So sometimes it's like that. The next part here, the DI concludes that the conduct of Barita, all right, so this was the company that we're talking about in the chapter there, all right, of a grant to Imperium raises several prudent concerns. The DI's conclusion is grounded in the fact that collateral said to have been provided for the loan either did not exist in the name of the borrower, Imperium, or did not exist at the material time. Also, a legal mortgage, which should have been registered in favor of Barita, was not registered. So this was where I was sharing in terms of the unsecure, loan. So, and then I guess Barita's response was that, based on some of their prime clients, they do not necessarily, I guess, do that at premium. Oh, they have it here. So further, as it relates to Barita's indication that the practice of not formally securing the loan by way of registration, but rather keeping the documents in registrable form is not unusual in respect of premium clients is unsatisfactory. So the DI is saying Barita said, you know what? Premium clients, we don't necessarily register the loan. But the DI is saying, no, we're not accepting that from Barita. So the DI's finding in this regard is premised on the fact that the documents contain certain fundamental errors, which would almost certainly render the security unregistrable. In the case of a mortgage, if the borrower therefore were to default on the loan, Barita would not be able, without the borrower's assistance, to register the mortgage against the property put up as collateral. And I am wondering, I don't know, but persons I am trying to learn here, the fact that an insurance policy that should have been assigned to the loan was not so assigned is further evidence of the significant risk associated with this business model. The foregoing effectively resulted in the grant of an unsecured loan where a secured loan was intended. So my thing here, and I'm learning here, is that if Barita wants to give an unsecured loan to anybody, Barita must know they're going to get back the money if the person decides that they can't pay them or if they default on the loan. I don't know, but that's my question there. But perhaps there are laws, and once there are laws, we have to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. All right, so now over to the recommendations. All right, so we went with the summary of the findings of the investigations, the conclusions, and now we'll take a look at the recommendations. So the first one is that this report be referred to the Director of Corruption Prosecution for consideration as to whether the offense of making a false statement in a statutory declaration and or any other offenses have been committed. All right, so that's one there. Respecting the tax compliance concerns around the filing of nil income tax returns on the part of Imperium, Estate Bridge, Positive Media, and Green Emerald in circumstances where these entities appear to be engaged in business activities, the DI recommends that a copy of this report be referred to the Commissioner General, Tax Administration, Jamaica, for the necessary assessment to be made and where required for the appropriate penalties to be imposed. Next part here, having regard to the questions around the funding and operations of Positive Media, Positive Jamaica Foundation, and Green Emerald, the DI recommends that a copy of this report be referred to FID for the necessary investigations to be conducted. The findings of the DI's investigation raises significant questions around the income generating capacity of the reference companies relative to the funds which have been identified in their accounts. In the case of Positive Media, the loans issued or transferred made to Imperium. In the case of Green Emerald, the loans issued to Positive Media, and in the case of Positive Jamaica Foundation, the circumstances surrounding the alleged use of funds belonging to Positive Jamaica Foundation by Mr. Holness as partial source of funds for the purchase of a bond in his name, the Director of Investigations powers and limited resources, and ex- ex- exigencies relative to remit and time do not allow him to sufficiently ventilate this issue. So they're saying that the director just in terms of limited resources here regarding, so they're saying this is why they're sending this matter to the FID. All right, so limited resources and limited powers, time. So FID needs to take on that in terms of those companies. All right. On the finding that Mr. Norman Brown, a business partner of Mr. Holness, is the chairman of two of Jamaica's large development corporations, the UDC and HAJ, within Mr. Holness's ministerial portfolio. The DI recommends that a copy of this report be referred to the Ethics Committee of Parliament to examine and determine the appropriateness of a minister directly or indirectly appointing a business associate or other personal connections to a public board which falls under their portfolio. The committee should, among other things, consider whether there are sufficient safeguards in place to comprehensively deal with any conflict of interest situation which may arise as a result of the personal or business relationship between the minister and board appointee with a view to ultimately protecting the public interest. All right. James, welcome. Yes, James, I was asking about that report too because yeah, perhaps you just joined us and I was saying that report would have been significant because it took 6 months approximately based on this report here that we have gone through so far. And I said, that would be very significant in terms of the findings, and the individual did submit a report based on this report that I am looking at here. All right, so the next part here, having regard to the concerns in respect of the conduct of Barita, all right, so regarding that loan to Imperium, the DI recommends that a copy of this report be referred to the Financial Services Commission for consideration as to whether the practices of that entity are consistent with the spirit and scheme of the FSC Act. All right, so that is on Barita. And I'm saying, like, if you have a bank and they want to give you something unsecured as opposed to secured, I don't know. But that's let the law run its course. It is further recommended that an audit be conducted by the FSC of Barita's operations to determine whether they are compliant with the law, industry standards, as well as the terms and conditions of their license, where there are breaches identified on the part of Barita, that the Financial Services Commission impose such sanctions as may be necessary and appropriate in the circumstances so that confidence may be restored and maintained within the financial sector. So that's on the part of Barita now. So this has nothing to do with the PM, but because the PM was associated with one of the companies that got that unsecured loan, what the DI is saying in terms of their investigation here is that that should have not happened. The loan should have been registered as a mortgage, and that did not happen. So that's the situation there with Barita, from my understanding. And here, as a last recommendation, the DI directs the attention of the Parliament and the Cabinet Secretary to the issue of parliamentarians and public officers engaging in the purchasing of shares and other equities in public corporations, as well as private companies, which fall under the regulatory regime of the government of Jamaica, without prejudice to the right of any citizen to engage in any of the foregoing activities. The DI recommends that strict laws and guidance be implemented to mitigate conflict of interest and the abuse of authority for financial gain and other actions which may, in substance, amount to insider trading. It cannot be overlooked that parliamentarians and public officers, by virtue of their respective positions, will come into confidential information from time to time having to do with investment opportunities, directly or indirectly arising from government interventions and policies which they could use to their advantage or for benefit of another. All right. So here, having regard to the above findings and recommendations of this report, it cannot be ignored that as Prime Minister and the head of government, Mr. Holness has a higher duty to the public to ensure that the laws of Jamaica are maintained and that he bears in mind and acts according to established public virtues which have been in existence since time im- immemorial and which have been succinctly encapsulated in the Nolan principles of public life. The import of the importance of the Nolan principle is that those who hold public office should embody the virtues of selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. This, of course, is not to question Mr. Olness's commitment to the virtues aforementioned, except to say that a number of the findings of this report are antithetical to those virtues. All right, so that's what they're saying, that there are some findings that do not support the Nolan principles, all right, based on what they have shared here. All right, so that's pretty much the report here from the Integrity Commission. All right, and just to share that in all fairness and in terms of balance, that Mr. Holness, he was sharing in Parliament some days ago that he was rejecting some of the findings of the report, and we also see where the opposition, they're sharing their perspective in the context of saying that the Prime Minister should, I guess, resign. We're seeing where the JLP, I guess, in terms of the lower and upper house, they're supporting the Prime Minister. And we'll definitely watch how this one plays out for sure. And I say, let the law let the law take its course. It is as, I guess, simple as that. So we will be definitely, just keeping an eye on this one in the context of this report. and just to get a sense of, what will happen. But, again, I feel like a key part is just to have that report in the context of what that international forensic examiner shared in their report. I feel that that would be significant to this, just to share that information with you as well. So this is pretty much from the director there of investigation in the context of this, report. All right, so let me just double check in the chat here just to see if I'm missing out on any comments. So guys, we are still here. Close the chat and let's get the thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up button. And it's country above self, and we all want the best for Jamaica, land we love. So for sure, we are going to want to ensure that, as people, we're definitely seeing the funds of our country being directed to where it is needed. All right. And so here we're just based on this report, it's pretty much saying that there isn't a conclusive finding to say that the Prime Minister benefited from illicit enrichment. But what I am gathering, what I am understanding from this report is that based on the findings, the DI, so the director there of, I guess, investigation, is pretty much they referred, and I believe they shared the report by the for them to do further investigation, right? So there were concerns that I raised, and so we'll definitely hear further about this as things unfold. All right. So this is definitely, something that we'll keep an eye out on. We're not into this platform. We're not into, trying to break people or disrespect people or belittle people. So we'll wait for information and try to share, the facts with you guys. So at one point, and I believe I heard perhaps Tom Tavares, the senator, was sharing that, they could not, I guess, make a referral to the FID, so that's the Financial Investigation Division, all right, regarding this. But apparently, some time ago, there was an MOU signed, right, there was an MOU signed by the Integrity Commission and the FID. All right. So from that MOU, I guess it was really set up to help, I guess, the commission, all right, in terms of criminal investigation. So it assists both organizations in carrying out their respective statutory mandates, power and responsibilities. So in the context of that MOU, and I believe that was back in 2021 when that was done. All right. So just to share that information with you. So that is definitely something that they can do for sure, which they did. All right. So the integrity, the FID, according to the Gleaner, all right, the FID moves to analyze the Integrity Commission's report on Prime Minister Andrew Holness' statutory declarations. The Gleaner understands that his legal team plans to pursue judicial review of the referral. All right, so I'm not too sure why, but we'll definitely get an update there as to why. And again, this is from the Gleaner. Sources have indicated that the Prime Minister is taking steps to use Section 6, subsection 3A Integrity Commission Act. The commission not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority other than the court by way of judicial review. All right. In that regard, the informed sources said that the Prime Minister will be seeking a judicial review of IC Director of Investigations Heaven Stevenson's decision to send his report to send his investigation report to the FID, which probes financial crimes. In a release yesterday, the FID said it received communication from the IC earlier in the day. And this is a quotation here from the FID, the Commission's report, and determine what, if any, specific area may be probed in keeping with the mandate of the FID. All right, Stevenson said the IC could not certify the assets of the Prime Minister until the FID completed its probe. All right, and so I guess this is where the issue lies, I guess, for the Prime Minister, because they're saying that the Integrity Commission should not be relying on another body for them to make their final decision. All right. So according to the Gleaner continues by saying, in his report, Stevenson said that having regard to questions around the funding and operations of companies linked to the Prime Minister as well as his charity, he recommended that a copy of the report be referred to the FID for further investigation. And we talked about that bond, all right, that 94,000 US already, all right, just in terms of that, allegedly that the charity funded that. All right, so just to share that again with you. So just some information there. All right, just checking in the chat here. So that's pretty much it, guys, on this one. All right, so thank you so much for tuning in. And as soon as we get further information, we'll definitely share with you. All right, as we get them. And we try to wait to kind of cross check, trying to find sources too. So we're sharing from the sources and we're not, spreading information that is baseless. So thanks again for tuning in, and I'll definitely see you in the next one. So blessings and love, everyone, and I'll see you in the next live. Bye for now.